Still not.
Yeah. Long time ago, I did my PhD at MIT.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Hi, David. I'll say a few words about the MIT Enterprise Forum, the organization which is hosting this event, and then a few words about MISTI, the co-host partner. And let's start. So a few words about the MIT Enterprise Forum. The MIT Forum has been active in Israel for over 25 years now. Is the video on?
No, the video off.
Now you can see me. So the MIT Enterprise Forum is hosting this event. We are on our 26th year in Israel, 42nd year worldwide. And we've been working with entrepreneurs in high technology, actually throughout the time of the Startup Nation development, when very few people knew anything about entrepreneurship, marketing, funding, strategy. And for many years, we held monthly meetings at the Tel Aviv University, Rekanati School of Business. And we're very happy to hold this event together with MISTI. I'll tell you a few things about MISTI. So founded in 2008, the MISTI programs aims to strengthen connections between Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Israel. Since its founding, it's become a strong bridge between MIT and Israel, offering MIT students summer internships in Israeli companies and labs, opportunities to teach STEM subjects to high schoolers across Israel, in collaboration with MIT academic departments, 4-credit classes through which MIT students learn about Israel before spending 2-3 weeks in the country working on projects related to their course of study and supporting MIT and Israeli collaborative research by a range of faculty seed funds. For those of you who wish to learn more, you're very welcome to write us or David Dolev, who's here. You'll find him on the chat, project leader, and we'll send you all information that you may wish to have. I am now happy to introduce one of MISTI's program alums, Peniel Argaw, an MIT alum and a PhD student at the Computer Science Department, Harvard University, where her research deals with machine learning applications in healthcare. Peniel took part in an internship at Sheba Medical Center, where we are, in the summer of 2018 through the MISTI MIT Israel program. And I'd like to hand the microphone over to her. Peniel, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Ayla. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Peniel. I'm an MIT alum from Colorado and currently a first-year PhD student at Harvard. So I took part in an internship at Sheba Medical Center in summer 2018, where I was working at the Innovation Center to build models to classify radiological images, as well as shadowing doctors in various departments. I was specifically interested in being part of the MISTI Israel program because I wanted to see what life was like there as a local. I had gone to Israel before for vacation, but going as a tourist versus living and working there is a different experience. So I wanted to go there, see that, and understand and learn about the different diverse and unique cultures in the country. So my experience at Sheba allowed me to bring my computer science background to aid in the development of the project, and that resulted in publications to the hospital. It gave me the opportunity to combine my interests of machine learning and healthcare and working with clinicians and working in a hospital setting, which I had not done before. Previously, I'd worked mainly in computational background or computational settings. And working in a hospital also helped me to understand the medical background of our work and see the direct benefit of the project. And personally, I was happy to travel to the country, make new friends, meet people at work and outside. I enjoyed practicing my little Hebrew that I knew at the markets. And it was interesting to meet people from almost every continent and see how everyone's background was integrated into the overall Israeli culture. And this was all possible through the MISTI seminars and Hebrew lessons that we had before going to our internship in the summer. And currently now in my PhD, I'm continuing in a similar field as my Sheba internship and continuing it with the hospital research. So for this webinar, since we'll have talks from industry, academia, and the hospital, these are all places where MISTI students can and have worked at. So I hope for those of you who are outside of Israel that this webinar will give you a taste of Israel and the interesting medical innovation that's being done there. And to those of you who are in Israel, this is also a great opportunity for each of you to learn about hosting MIT students once this pandemic ends. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so what we have on our program today, we actually have the triangle between the user, which is today represented by the Sheba Hospital, the startup company, which will be represented by Avner Halperin, who will follow me in a few minutes, and the research looking into the future, for the reason of which we have Professor Schroeder of the Technion to summarize the program. Now, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, as we know, and this terrible pandemic, at the same time, with a very high life cost, has also erupted a wealth of inventions, innovation, cross-disciplinary thinking, and we're seeing a lot of this helping all over the world, and in Israel as well. We're seeing a lot of telemedicine taking over, things that seem to be coming up for years, but now really taking over. We're seeing a lot of telestudying, and we're seeing a lot of new research trying to forecast where the pandemic is developing. We're seeing a lot of chemistry developments trying to stop the virus. There's a whole lot of new developments about which you can read in many places, in many of the magazines, tech magazines in Israel. And for some reason, we're seeing Israel excelling, according to at least one standard. Israel is 5th worldwide in the level of innovation associated with the COVID-19. And I'd like to hand over the microphone to our first speaker today. And this is Avner Halperin, founder and for many years the CEO of Early Sense. Very, very interesting company that started from a personal need while his daughter was suffering from asthma. And with the idea of we have to find a way to sort this out, and ended as being an incredibly important part of the fighting of the COVID-19. And Avner is an alumni of MIT, of the school, of the Sloan Business School. Avner, will you take over? Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you, Ayla, for the introduction. I'm, as I mentioned, one of the founders and CEO. I've been CEO of Early Sense for 15 years until handing it over. Now a board member in several initiatives. I'll talk about innovation in a period of need and crisis, and I'll do it at 3 levels, starting with the personal level, then the company level, and then the ecosystem, all very briefly. But the story of Early Sense actually started with a need in an ecosystem. A personal need in time of challenge, and that's with my daughter's asthma and the asthma of my co-founder, of his son. And the need then was to find a way to prevent hospitalization of kids by identifying when an attack is impending. We realized that asthma is the #1 cause for hospitalization of kids, and we could prevent those hospitalizations if we could just know a few hours before they happen that the attack is impending, and then the same intervention that we are familiar with of the inhaler is extremely effective in preventing hospitalization. It's very challenging and really frustrating to see a child that's not able to breathe, and as a parent, you can't help them. So for me, this was a real need, a real challenge, and we were looking for a way to prevent these hospitalizations, and we developed a solution. Solution was actually a sensor that goes under the mattress of a bed, and the story of the princess and the pea, it is the pea under the mattress that nobody feels except for the princess. And it actually helped, it detected all the critical vital signs, breathing, motion, heart rate through the mattress, detecting every breath, every heart rate, every motion. And with strong data analytics, was able to give early warning of deterioration. I'll share a few slides about the company that came out of that initiative. As often happens, the device that was developed is actually let me see it. See the slide?
That's not the slide.
Just a second. And this way. Oh, okay. So we developed a solution that's based on that sensor that goes under the mattress of a bed, and through that sensor actually detect the vital signs, do the data analytics, and give the early warning. We started with kids and asthma, but as often happens to companies, we pivoted to where there was a more immediate implementation, and we moved that solution to be implemented in hospitals. And today, the system actually looks like this. Sensor under the mattress connected to a central station and a monitoring. And every patient that's monitored, the data goes to the clinician and to a central station, and alerts are generated when deterioration, early warning is identified. This has been now used on over 1 million patients in hundreds of medical centers around the world, in hospitals and in post-acute sites, used in order to give clinicians the exact information of when they need to intervene and to keep patients in lower acuity environments. So as a company, Early Sense was well poised to respond to the pandemic of the COVID-19, but also needed to innovate quickly in order to adapt itself. On one hand, algorithms have been optimized to provide effective early warning, but it's not just the early warning given to the clinicians. We also realize that we need to be creative in how to implement, because in several of the medical institutions that we wanted to install in, especially in the United States, our clinical implementing people and our technical installers were not able to even go into those sites because of the pandemic rules. So we actually needed to develop solutions for remote installation and remote implementation of these solutions on the site. And another key point that we have kind of needed to adapt and learn was that we realized that the device helps not just keep the patient safe, but also keep the safety of the clinicians by minimizing the interaction between clinicians and patients and minimizing the need to touch their body with a contactless sensor. I'll show as we speak at the millimeter first one. Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I understand you saw partial of the screen. So now that you see the screen, I'll actually let you see, run a little video. You can see the implementation of the device, and you see the sensor in an actual COVID-19 implementation in one of the hospitals. And what you see here is the actual device connected remotely, not touching the patient, and keeping the clinicians as safe as possible by not require them to interact and touch the body of the patient, and by minimizing the number of false alarms that are being generated by the system. This is one of the strengths of the system. We're actually able to bring to maximum effectiveness the time of the clinicians and to minimum the number of physical interactions that actually put the clinician at risk with the patient. This is what the remote information looks like, and you'll hear a little more about that in a few minutes. And this is one of the implementations in Sheba Medical Center, where you see our monitoring. And as more and more data is collected, actually the algorithms get better and better and smarter in providing the early warning and empowering the clinicians to intervene. And what we have learned, and it's not just critical to give early warning in order to take care of the patients that are at highest risk, it's also very valuable to know which patients are doing well, which patients we actually don't need to intervene with. In many cases, that is even more critically valuable, because by knowing that these 50 or 60 or 70% of patients are actually stable, that allows our clinical teams to focus on those patients that need the time of the clinicians. So in many cases, what we're seeing is that by big data analytics, by identifying the patterns of patients who are doing well, we can actually save a lot of time and effort of clinicians and allow them to focus where they are needed. So that's at the company level. We needed to adapt and quickly implement the system for the pandemic, and we've seen now become very effective in multiple medical centers in North America and in Israel. I also want to touch briefly on the level of the ecosystem. You see here the ability to partner with multiple companies and so on that we have seen in our company, but we see in many of the companies the need to partner with larger players. And you may have seen this. This is a map done by Startup Nation Center here in Israel of all the relevant companies in Israel that are actually involved in providing solutions for the COVID-19 pandemic. Quite a wide set and really an amazing, I would say, collection of different technologies focused on supporting and providing solutions. But as we look at the Israeli ecosystem, I think the picture is even bigger than that, because we saw not just the companies involved, but also organizations like defense institutions, army units, putting their engineers to work and developing solutions. We've seen local government initiatives. I'm involved in one of the cities, the city of Bet Shemesh, actually put together solutions to help local small businesses thrive or survive by having a direct connection with their customers. And we see NGOs like Tikkun Olam Makers generating maker spaces, solutions for pandemics such as masks and protection gear, car protection solutions of people infecting each other. So truly a diverse and closely knit ecosystem coming together to overcome the pandemic. And what I hope I was able to give you here is a perspective both of the local entrepreneur, the single entrepreneur that tries to help his daughter, and then the company that takes that solution to help and monitor over 1 million patients, and then the whole ecosystem that actually comes together in order to provide a very wide set of answers in this time of crisis we hope we're at the end of. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions at the end. Okay, I'll stop the...
So as you have figured out, there's the three of us here at Dr. Zimlichman's office at Sheba. And Avner is talking about the benefits, the huge benefits, as part of the crisis. We're seeing the benefits of systems ready to go much faster in accepting new technologies. And we're seeing it in big institutions, giving permissions to innovations to take place, to faster trials and to faster adoption across the border. And as Avner mentioned, the very interesting cross-border collaborations. For instance, one is of the Technion, Rafael, and Intel, who have developed a very interesting system of trying to forecast where the pandemic, and doing it quite successfully. We're seeing other organizations doing similar things. Always look at the bright side of life, right? Well, I wanted to say hi to everybody again and mention that we have viewers to this webinar from Niger, from Bolivia, from Paraguay, from the United States and Israel, and we'd love to hear more of you if you're there. Please use the chat to send us questions. Karen Biale, who's here with us, will be looking at the questions and sorting them out. Questions will be answered at the end of the program between 8 and 8:15 Israel time. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. This is Dr. Eyal Zimlichman, currently Chief Medical Officer and Chief Innovation Officer at the Sheba Medical Center, Israel's largest hospital. Prior to this, Dr. Zimlichman has held the position of lead researcher at Partners Healthcare Clinical Affairs Department in Boston, where he was involved in the efforts to bring about the Strategic Care Redesign Initiative. Dr. Zimlichman has served on several boards, advisory committee commissioned by the Office of the National Coordinator for Health, Information Technology at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and is chairing and sitting on several committees at the Israeli Health Ministry. Dr. Zimlichman is a founder and director of Sheba's ARC Innovation Program, an open global innovation ecosystem which aims to redesign healthcare through digital health solutions by 2030. Eyal is a board certified in internal medicine, is a graduate of the Harvard Business School in Public Health, and has earned his MD at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology, a wonderful, wonderful school. Eyal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ayla, and
So thank you, Ayla, for this introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'll be happy to tell you the story of what we've been doing here at Sheba Medical Center during this challenging times in the past weeks and months since we had this new threat, this pandemic upon us. I'll start by saying a few words about Sheba Medical Center. I'm sure some of you are not familiar with Sheba, or maybe you know it by its other name, Tel HaShomer Hospital here in Israel. And this is an aerial photo of Sheba, a recent one. Sheba is considered one of the largest hospitals in the world. It's certainly the largest in Israel and largest in the Middle East. And as I've mentioned, large by any standards. You could see here on this aerial photo, we have about 150 different buildings on campus. We have 24,000 cars that come in every day, so you could imagine parking is an issue. We have 2,000 beds, which is how you measure and compare size of hospitals. Not just the size, but also the quality has been reflected by Newsweek, who just last year started rating hospitals on a global scale. And this year, in 2020, they rated 2,000 hospitals from around the world, and Sheba came in as number 9 in the world. Of course, we're very much thrilled with this announcement, and of course, very proud of the achievement. So Sheba is very well known, not just for its high quality care, and of course for its size and footprint here in Israel, but also for research and innovation. And about 3.5 years ago, I was asked to take over the innovation office. As mentioned, I have the 2 hats in Sheba, both as the Chief Medical Officer and as Chief Innovation Officer. And when I came into this new role, it was my ambition to try and structure a new innovation strategy and a program that sees far into the future and comes up with a clear vision and a pathway to get us to where we need to be. We've actually set our goal to the year 2030, and we're aiming to completely reshape how medicine is being delivered by that time. Now, that's quite ambitious, of course, as you could imagine. But to understand what this new program is about, and we called it ARC, A-R-C, which stands for Accelerate, Redesign, and Collaborate. Accelerate innovation to redesign healthcare by collaborating with partners. And ARC is really based on these 4 principles. The first one is understanding that digital health is going to be the main transformation agent that's going to take us to where we need to be in 10 years from now. Much more than probably pharma and medical devices in terms of the impact on how we go through healthcare in day-to-day life. And you'll see some examples here. And the second is open innovation, working together with startup companies like EarlySense, and we have a close relation with EarlySense for a few years now, and I'll tell you more about that. But working together with startup companies, providing them 360 degrees what they need to really very quicken development to make sure that they deliver solutions that the market actually needs and provide them with what we call a startup-friendly environment here at Sheba. And not just startup companies, but also large vendors and industry partners that we're working with very closely. Then international collaborations. We've built our ARC innovation ecosystem, which includes currently 15 of the leading academic medical centers from around the world, mostly focused in North America, but the names that a lot of you are familiar with in the Boston area, Brigham and Women's and Mass General and Mayo Clinic in Minnesota and Mount Sinai in New York and Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia and Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles and Sunnybrook in Toronto and McGill in Montreal and so on and so on. And this ecosystem right now is working in tandem to get to where we need to be in 10 years, sharing the same vision and working proactively to making that vision a reality. We officially launched the system about 6 months ago, and it's really been taken off in a quite an incredible way in the past few months, just before COVID hit and through COVID-19 as well. And lastly, it's about the innovation infrastructure. When you want to accelerate innovation, it's about the rules and regulations that govern all large institutions, and how can you make sure that they actually promote innovation rather than stifle innovation. And we know large organizations and bureaucracy tend to do that. And you need to change that so that innovation can really push forward. It's about the data infrastructure, which is critical. We always pride ourselves as having a lot of data, being completely paperless for almost 20 years now. But it's not just about the amount of data that you have, but also the infrastructure of how the data is structured. And that is critical as well. And lastly, it's about the physical infrastructure. And you see in this photo here how our innovation campus is going to look like by the year 2025. We've started construction on this campus. 2 buildings out of the 5 are already up and running. We're running our operations from these 2 buildings, and the others are going to be done by 2025 with an underground parking garage, so there won't even be parking issues for those of you who are challenged with finding parking at Sheba. This is where we're focused on day to day. So we call these the ARC hubs, and where our strategic focus lies. From big data and artificial intelligence to virtual reality and augmented reality, to the operating room of the future, robotics and automation and AI-based navigation and next generation anesthesia and so on, to telemedicine, which is a huge focus of ours, rehabilitation, and finally personalized or precision medicine, from genomics to proteomics to microbiomics and so on. And this is what we've been doing before COVID struck, and something happened while we first heard about the virus, as you all know. It started here in Israel with the first patients that came into the country, and this was from the Diamond Princess cruise ship off the coast of Japan. You're familiar with the story. About 14 Israelis were on board, and there was a decision to airlift them back into Israel, and Sheba volunteered to receive those first patients that came in. Everybody was quite terrified at the time. We didn't know too much about the virus. There were a lot of rumors going around, but we stepped forward and said, yes, February 16, we're going to tend for those first patients who came in. And this was the time when we started dealing with coronavirus here in Israel. The next question we had to ask ourselves is innovation essential or non-essential in times of crisis? As you know, many businesses that were non-essential, went home, basically stopped working. People went on leaves. And at the hospital, when doctors and nurses are obviously, and other healthcare professionals are obviously very much essential, what about the innovation team? What about the ARC innovation team? Is it essential in times of crisis? It took us 7 minutes to understand not just that it's essential, but also that it's critical in times of crisis. And what we've done is we've declared battle mode at ARC. And you'll look at the upper left corner of the screen, you'll see our new logo, from ARC to ARC COVID-19 battle mode, signifying that what we're actually doing is focusing 100% of our efforts on COVID-19, trying to come up with solutions that are going to save lives in no time, because we were all in a haste to get as many innovations and solutions out there. And this is the new game plan, the new COVID-19 ARC game plan. Data is, of course, still playing a critical role, and I'll say a few words about what we're doing with data as well. Ventilation solutions, diagnostics, from spectral imaging and diagnostics to other forms, from vocal signatures and others, to telemedicine, which is what I'm going to focus on for this presentation, therapeutics, and mobile health solutions, all for COVID-19. This became our new focus for the next 3 months since February 16, when we launched they launched the ARC COVID-19 battle mode. The first thing we did was, as a hospital, was put together this new compound about a mile out from the main campus at Sheba, which was intended to receive those first 14 patients from the Diamond Princess cruise ship. The Sheba Isolated Corona unit, which later on became our first COVID-19 unit with 40 beds for then patients that came in, obviously later, and contracted the disease here in the country. From our perspective, we had a challenge, and that was to provide high-level medical care, because that's obviously our aim, while minimizing physical contact for the staff. The reason we wanted to do that, and I think it's obvious, was to minimize risk for staff contracting the virus and contracting the disease. We know that was an issue in China, and that was the example we had to learn from at the time. It very quickly became an issue in northern Italy and some other locations in Europe, and also in some locations in the US, where a large number of staff members contracted the disease and basically could not help us in treating patients, of course, some of them actually even dying. And the idea was to try and minimize the risk for the staff so that they could continue and take care of these COVID-19 patients. How can you minimize physical contact while maintaining high-level medical care? That was one of the first challenges we were confronted with. To solve that, we understood that we need to provide solution in three ways. One is we need an ability to communicate with the patients. Second, we need an ability to monitor the patients. And thirdly, we need an ability to perform physical examination on the patient, because as you all know, traditional physical examination requires contact between the clinician and the patient. How can you do that when you're not sitting in the same room? And for this, we were set out to harness telemedicine technologies we already were using before COVID-19. And this is where our experience at Sheba and ARC specifically was very helpful in coming up with this solution. So this is an example of one of those rooms where we had the COVID-19 initial patients. This is a room for a mild case. Of course, more severe cases, the room would look much more like a hospital room. But for mild cases, this is how the rooms look like. And these simple rooms were retrofitted with some of the most cutting-edge technologies. I'll mention just a few here, but you wouldn't notice it. There's a lot of technology hiding inside this room for low acuity people for us to avoid the physical contact. The clinical staff, instead of being there with the patients, were sitting outside in a control room, a control tower, where all the information was flowing into. You see here an example. Basically for this compound outside of Sheba, we actually put up a tent. We call it a teletent. We're very much used to it in Israel, as you know, working from tents from our army experience. So it was very natural for us. And here are some examples of some of the technologies we've been using. So for communication, we used a technology called Uniper, which basically turns any regular TV. It was obviously built for the home environment, for any TV that people have at home. And it was originally developed for elderly population who we know are not so much at ease using sophisticated technology. And the idea was that, you know, once you install this, you turn your TV into a sophisticated communication station that allows you to communicate on many, many levels. You can see the remote control here in the middle of the slide, very easy to use by elderly population, very large buttons, and so on. And these are some examples. This is a video visit with one of our patients inside one of these rooms, where a doctor on the other end could converse with the patient. Here's another one. This is a group visit. This is Professor Gili Regev, our infectious disease specialist, who's talking with all of our patients, original patients who came in from the Diamond Princess, and she could have a group visit, providing them information, and they're all on the screen with them. We're now seeing this a lot with Zoom, of course, but this is a technology specifically designed for a more elderly population, very easy to use, and allowing us a lot of options to play around. This is a psychologist providing therapy to a patient in need in one of those rooms. And this is one of the patients who's having a conversation with his family. So you see all his family members, they could be in different places of the globe, theoretically, but this is a group session, a family session with a patient who is hospitalized in this unit. So of course, communication, we need to provide all of these solutions for all of these needs. Second is monitoring. And of course, there were multiple ways for self-examinations and reporting of vital signs. But I do want to talk about early sense, and you heard from Avner about the technology. And why did we end up using early sense? Because there are many, many solutions for monitoring out there. It was critical for us to have an ability to be able to diagnose patient deterioration very early on. And some of you know this. COVID-19 is notorious for having patients deteriorate very, very quickly. The nature of the disease is that you have a mild condition, flu-like condition, very mild symptoms, and that can go on for 6 or 7 days. And then in a matter of hours, you could deteriorate very quickly to a point of a life-threatening condition. Those few hours are critical. We need to be able to capture the patients in those few hours, be able to respond, be able to transfer the patient to a higher level of care, and so on. And so when you treat those patients who are at mild conditions, you have to keep that in mind, because these patients can shift their condition very, very rapidly. That's one thing. The second thing we know is that COVID-19 typically affects the lungs much more than any other organ in the body. And so what we're going to be seeing first is a rise in respiration rate. And then other things start following, saturation of the oxygen in the blood and so on. But the rise in respiration rate would be the first sign we need to recognize with these patients. And of course, looking around for devices that measure respiration rate, it was clear to us that Early Sense is probably the best equipped for this type of need. And Early Sense has been working in the past 10 years and even more than that in hospitals in the US and in Israel in trying to learn from the data to be able to predict patient deterioration, of course not with COVID-19, but with other conditions like pneumonia, like sepsis, and other things that we see in hospitals. And so this was a perfect choice for us to use for these types of patients. So Early Sense, as you know, can monitor heart rate and respiration rate and motion. And then there's an AI-based algorithm that can predict the clinical deterioration very early on, many times before it actually starts. And you'll see an example soon. But it displays all this information into a central display station. You can see here how this central display station looks in a usual medical floor. And each one of those rows that you see here in the scheme is a patient inside this ward or medical floor. When you see this red line or red color on one of those lines, one of those rows, that means that there is an alert that was triggered. This specific example, you see the red in the middle of the screen was a low respiration rate alert. Let me show you how the screen looks like in our COVID-19 unit. You see everything is red. And it's all high respiration. And you could see the numbers in the screen from 30 to more than that, to 45 and so on. This is a typical COVID-19 unit. Most of the patients, if not all of the patients, have high respiration rate because of their disease. And this is why Early Sense is such a great fit for those types of patients. And this is how we see that deterioration for a specific patient. What you see here is a timeline going from about 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning, going to 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And then the blue line is the respiration rate. And it starts with about 20 to 30 at 8 a.m., which is just over normal, but not still not very alarmingly high, to about 50 by 2 p.m. in a matter of 6 hours. Going from 20 to 50 is a huge problem. And this is a patient we want to transfer from this unit who is intended for mild cases to, of course, a higher level of care like an intensive care unit. And this was this example that you see here and why Early Sense was so helpful for us to identify those patients. Moving to another technology, TytoCare, which allows us to perform physical examination from afar. And this is what you're seeing here. TytoCare is, again, a technology that existed pre-COVID-19. It was built mostly for parents who have a sick child at home. And instead of going to the urgent care facility or the emergency department, which of course none of us like to do, allowing doctors to examine the child from afar, using this technology that allows us doctors to listen to the heart, listen to the lungs, look down the throat, look into an ear, and look for any skin lesions using this telemedicine technology. You still stay at home and the doctor can examine you from a few blocks away, another city, or another country. Distance doesn't play a role here, of course. It was evident for us that this could play a role in examining those COVID-19 patients where the doctor is only in a different room inside the same hospital, but again, trying to minimize the contact. You can see here an example. This is Dr. Gadi Segal, the head of our first corona unit, and he's listening to the heart and lungs with the headphones and looking into the throat of a patient through the screen, as you could see here. And what we've seen is many, many clinicians across the hospital that never used Tyto before, but now, because of this need, started using Tyto to examine their patients, and the reactions we were getting is quite amazing. You know, they were saying this is high quality, this is just the same as standing next to the patient using my own stethoscope. And from hearing this from many doctors who have been doing clinical practice the traditional way for decades, listening at how open they are now to using this new technology, this new digital health solution was quite amazing for us. And we're running a survey right now, which we're going to publish about what their views are on this technology and how easy was it for them to move from the traditional stethoscope to this type of solution. So really amazing. And I could definitely tell you that many of them are going to use this technology moving out of COVID as well. Obviously, when you try to examine patients who are at home while you're at the hospital, and this is where we're aiming, of course, with many of the new initiatives in telemedicine. So very quickly, we also used some robots. You see here, this is a robot that allows us, again, to examine patients and move in. We call it telepresence, used in ICUs traditionally, but here we use it inside our other units. And here's another example, and I'll finish with this one. This is an example where we took the same technology I've showed you, the early sense, the Tyto care. We used a platform called Datos, which is a company we use to perform the telemedicine platform. And we've put it inside a kit. We ship the kit home to a patient who was a mild case for home hospitalization. You use the kit, we can examine you every day through the Tyto care. We monitor you through early sense and so on. And after a couple of days when things are back to normal and you're discharged from your own home hospitalization, we come in and we pick up the kit, sterilize it, and send it to the next patient. These kits of home hospitalization actually became viral, if you could use the word viral anymore. I think it's going to go out of fashion now, but they really went viral, and we got requests from all over the world to use something like this, again, comprehensive toolkit, zero-touch telemedicine for monitoring physical examination and management. And we'll finish with that, a couple of pictures here to see our ICU and lessons learned. First of all, telemedicine can provide a comprehensive service solution that is highly scalable, even in times of crisis, as we see here. The technology already exists. We didn't have to invent anything new here, but utilize existing technology for our needs in these unusual times. Times of crisis also present opportunities, and we think that the COVID-19 pandemic might be remembered as the turning point for digital transformation in general, and telemedicine specifically. I can't say let's look at the half full glass, because there's much more than a half empty glass in this tragic situation, but maybe there's some positive to see here. And I think this is what we're seeing with telemedicine and digital transformation in healthcare. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you so much, Eyal. This was actually fascinating. And it was great to have those two discussions. I have to say we're very proud of Early Sense and Avner, who is a member of the MIT Enterprise for Management. And of course, we see other cases of adoption, as Eyal just mentioned. Early today, I spoke to Aziz Kadan of Mindo Life and to Yoav Medan of Amplio Speech. And in both cases, we're seeing a very, very strong adoption, which was absolutely necessary nowadays when you can't go out of home, of platforms and the technologies that help people meet over the web, another enabler of telemedicine. And as promised, our next speaker is Technion Professor Avi Schroeder. And Avi is an associate professor of chemical engineering at the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. Dr. Schroeder conducted his postdoctoral studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and his PhD jointly at Hebrew University and Ben-Gurion University. Avi is a recipient of more than 30 national and international awards, the author of 50 research papers, inventor of 19 patents, and co-founder of several startup companies. This is pretty amazing. And a member of the Israel Young National Academy of Science and the president of Israel Institute of Chemical Engineers. And I'd love to hear you, Avi. I'd like to hear what you're doing, looking at the future.
So thanks so much, Ayla, and it's actually amazing being here tonight, this evening.
Could you unmute yourself?
Can I unmute myself? I think I'm unmuted, but
you are unmuted.
I am on. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but be in full screen in the presentation.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm back to full screen. So thanks everyone.
We want to see longer.
Yeah, I think that's what's fun about being with so many MIT engineers on the line. Previously, there was another technical issue, and within seconds, there were like 20 analyses, all exact how to solve it. So it's great being with all of you here tonight, or in the US morning time, and actually all around the world, because I saw people here from India, Nigeria, really every country, I think, that on the globe. I think for me, MIT really I recognize that science is something that can impact the lives of so many people. I saw it previously when I was a PhD student in Israel, but much more when I reached MIT. And today we're bringing, I think, that back to Israel. And this is here actually when Professor Bob Langer, my mentor in MIT, visited Israel, visited the Technion. But I have to say, this is the picture I actually like much more. And this is on the Cape Cod beach in the annual beach party with the other MIT alums and MIT students together with Bob. I think he seems much happier on the beach there. I surely look happier, and it was an honor hosting him here. And I think the connection between MIT and all of the Israeli institutions is very, very strong, and especially through the MISTI program, which brings students from MIT to study in the Israeli academic institutions. I had the privilege of hosting some of those students in our lab, and they became long-term friends of the lab. And students of ours, when they travel to the States, actually go and meet with their colleagues that came to spend the summer only with us. And it's been really very long. This is what our lab looks like on a normal day. And this is just pre-corona. So we were celebrating something, maybe a new paper or something else. And this is what research at the Technion really feels like. It's very diverse. We have in our team engineers from different fields, from biochemistry and chemical engineers. I'm a chemical engineer myself, biomedical engineers, and thereon. And of course, we have medical doctors also on the team, chemists and biologists, all working together to solve problems. And one problem we worked on in the past, actually, when I was still working with Chezi Bernholtz in the Hebrew University, this is a nano technology that's injected intra-articularly to patients with osteoarthritis. This has become already clinical in a company called Mobius Medical, and today with Sun Pharma. And actually, it was a pretty simple concept. For patients that have cartilage degradation, we'll be able to inject nanoparticles that will act as lubricants that will actually reduce friction and wear inside the joints. And that proved to be pretty effective. Engineering-wise, we needed to be able to reduce friction and wear, but also be able to continue and carry the body's load. And for me as an engineer, this graph really marked the change in the first change in my career when the clinical data came back. And actually, you see that in a concept that you think about in a team actually changes patients' lives. And we were looking here at the patients that were responding to our treatment and actually gaining back their ability to do daily activities. And later on, we also learned that not only were they able to get in and out of a chair, climb up and down stairs better compared to the gold standard at the time, these patients actually had a good side effect. They were consuming about 1/3 or 1/4 the amount of pain medicine compared to patients in the control. So sometimes a side effect of a technology can be a good side effect. And we were very, very excited about that. And for me, it showed that engineering and science can be implemented after you invent it in many patients and actually help many, many people. But that's in normal time. And we work in our lab on cancer, metastatic cancer, and pancreatic, such as pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, and also on Parkinson's disease and neurodegenerative diseases. However, this is what our lab looks like today. This is a picture taken through the window of the door. And I think it really resembles two things. One is the dedication of our young students, the researchers, and also their diversity. So in the back, you can see more grew up in a suburb town of Israel. I think she's the first in her family to achieve higher education. And on the left-hand side is Yegor, a student that came to us from Russia and joined our team. And on the right-hand side is Mohammed with his back to us, actually formulating a new treatment for treating ARDS, which is one of the conditions that affects COVID-19 patients. And I think that's what MIT is about, and that's what the Technion is about, is actually bringing together the best minds. These students are just amazing. And the way we interface with it is that COVID-19, the virus, is a nanoparticle. It's a natural nanoparticle, or one that's amplified inside our body, but it's a nanoparticle, and that gives us a lot of tools coming from the world of nanotechnology to be able to study and maybe also counter and treat COVID-19. So on the left-hand side, this is a picture I took off the web. On the left-hand side, you can see an image of the virus. I think we're all very well aware of it. This is probably one of the worst images that's on the web today. You can see it with its darts perfectly. And on the right-hand side, you can see a bacteria in green. And the nanoparticle size is about 200 nanometers, give or take, which is about 1/1000th the width of a hair on our head. So not the length, but the width of a hair on our head. On the right-hand side is bacteria. Bacteria is about 1,000 to 10,000 times larger than a virus. Just to give disease are actually the range of the size of viruses. So our lab technically switched a lot of its effort, just as said by the VP of Sheba Medical, of the VP of Sheba Hospital, which we're all, I have to say, in Israel, greatly appreciative of their hard work. We also shifted a lot of our efforts towards treating COVID-19 at this time. And specifically where our lab actually interfaced with viral diseases and nanotechnology started 5 years ago when I was approached by two entrepreneurs who were talking to me about a problem in aquaculture. And I felt that they're not telling me the whole story. And then I understood that because I'm a kosher eating person, they were telling me that aquaculture is suffering from viral diseases. And I said, guys, get to the point. Let's talk about it. And they said, well, it's actually shrimp. Shrimp, 1/4 to 1/3 of the shrimp that every year grow around the world die due to viral diseases. Now, this impacts, of course, the food supply or food chain of people in many countries, Asia, Europe, the United States, America. And this virus actually, which is extremely deadly, kills the shrimp within about 4 to 5 days. And it has a peak that's very similar to the COVID-19 peak in how effective or how contagious it actually is. And what we set to invent is a feed, because you can't inject them one at a time, that would amplify the immune system of the shrimp and actually counter the viral load inside the shrimp's body and counter the ability of the virus to continue infecting other cells inside the shrimp's body. Just this is from a post a couple weeks ago demonstrating again that viral diseases in agriculture, specifically in aquaculture, are extremely vicious. So I haven't gotten to the connection to COVID-19, but I'll get there in 1 second. Just to say that when we started this project, there were no treatments for viral diseases in aquaculture. And we invented a feed that contains inside it RNA molecules that are taken up by the shrimp's gut, where they induce a mechanism of amplifying the immune system, specifically RNA interference, so stopping the ability of the shrimp's body to produce viral proteins inside of it, and thereon stopping the viral infection. And to show the efficacy of such a technology, you can see the graph in front of you, and we were looking here at the survival of shrimp after an experiment. This actually was conducted in Thailand. You can't bring this virus into Israel. It's a very deadly virus for aquaculture. And you can notice that about if the shrimp are infected on day 4, and by day 8, more than 95% of the shrimp are dead, and by day 9, 100% are all dead. So extremely potent virus. And look at the control groups, the control arms in the orange line at the top of the graph, above 95% survival when you treat them with this specific RNAi feed. Now, we asked ourselves when COVID broke out, we said we have a lot of information about treating viral diseases. Can we actually adapt this now for treating people too against COVID? And that's where we're standing today. Specifically, we're combining 2 technologies that we've been working on in the lab for treating COVID. Specifically, we have nanoparticles that target the lungs in order to reduce the inflammatory response during viral infections and also other types of insults to the lung. And we decided to combine between lung-targeted nanoparticles, which were supposed to carry anti-inflammatory and other types of medication in order to reduce the level of inflammation, and actually swap in those same molecules or similar molecules to those we use in the shrimp. And just to familiarize people with the lung anatomy, people who may not have seen this, so we all know we depend on our breathing through the lungs. And a healthy lung actually has great exchange of gas between the alveoli, where the oxygen enters, the air enters, oxygen diffuses into our blood, and carbon dioxide diffuses out. And you can notice there's a very thin layer of tissue between the blood vessels and the alveoli. Contrarily, when we start being infected, such as also ARDS patients, we have inflammation in the lungs start becoming filled with fluid, and the gases, specifically oxygen, can't enter our bloodstream well, and carbon dioxide isn't let out, and that's why the patients breathe more oftenly, and of course their oxygen saturation drops, and that's where we wanted to counter. So just one graph or one picture of the technology. These are nanoparticles. They look very similar to the virus itself. This is a cryo-TEM of these particles. They're about 100 nanometers in diameter, slightly smaller than the virus. And you can't see the spikes on the surface of these nanoparticles, but they do have a corona of other molecules on the surface of the nanoparticle and medicine that's actually loaded into the nanoparticle. So each one of these spheres here or circles is a nanoparticle with medicine or medication inside of it. And their size, again, is about 100 nanometers in diameter. And when we went and we tested this in mice, these are mice that have lung inflammation, not yet by corona, but or COVID-19, but a different insult to the lung, very similar. And you can notice the accumulation of the nanoparticles in the lungs. These are the lungs of the mice after having fluorescently labeled nanoparticles injected intravenously to them. The nanoparticles target the lungs, and that's where the medicine will actually be released. So just to sum up, we looked at taking technologies from two worlds. One is the world of treating lung disorders using nanotechnology, lung-targeted medicines, and the other is from the world of shrimp, where we actually were able to counter very deadly viruses. And combining these two technologies into another technology is where we're actually aiming for treating COVID-19. I think I'm going to stop here. I see also Ayla ready for questions, I think, there. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Avi. Cut and paste from shrimps to people. How amazing. And we're now ready to take questions if anybody wants to ask. תגידי לי למי, תקריא לי. Somebody asked whether we're going to let you see the presentations. No problem, we'll take care of that. Further questions?
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Hi, this is Nirant here. I'm from India. I would like to know additionally about this shrimp technology that has been introduced. Whether it was actually covered worldwide or it was specifically, I mean, as Sir said, that they tested the particles from US or any other countries. And he told that about 1/3 of the population of shrimp was getting, I mean, it was dying due to that virus. Is there any parallel thing between COVID-19 and that virus? That's maybe that's why you have adopted that technology.
Yeah, so great question. Is there a parallel between COVID-19 and the virus? The virus is called white spot syndrome. So there are several similarities. The size, also the genetic content is similar. However, what's most important when you come to counter a virus is you usually want to target specific proteins that are necessary for the virus to continue infecting other cells. And so I would say what's most relevant between the two is the knowledge we generated studying on countering one virus for countering another virus. So having 5 years of development, research and development around that is really what helped us take this to the next step. Having that information, I'll say that at the time we were asked, why viral diseases? There are other diseases out there, but we did notice that there was an incline in the number of viral diseases that are impacting the world, especially in a market that at the time was a smaller market. So I think those are the similarities.
I got my answer, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I had one question for Eyal, sir, for the hospital setup. As you might be knowing that India is such a vast country, and with with a big, approximately 135 billion population, right? And most of the countries being run, I mean, from last around 2 months, we are totally locked down. Only essential services are being run. And as a student, I think there might be a situation where we are going to lag from the hospital beds. So, is there any other, I mean, suggestion from your side? Then how we can mitigate this problem? Just one of the problem I got to know, one of the solution I got to know from you, that we can send that kits to the patient's home, and the hospital authority can regularly monitor, right? Nowadays, what is happening over in India is, as far as I know as a student, that over a call from, I mean, in a day, approximately two time, a local medical authorities, I mean, they are on a call monitoring the patient, just asking them about their health. Uh, but I think these new kits that have been developed, it may help. But what if the hospital beds are going to, they are going to get full, and we are going to, it might be a situation where actually active patient need to be at its home, because we have such a large population density in some of the area like Mumbai, or like some of the, cities like Ahmedabad in Gujarat, Surat, where we cannot, it's not possible to even construct a new infrastructure at this time of time, temporary infrastructure. Thank you.
So as far as I can tell, in terms of this solution that we've devised here for the hospitalization at home, of course, is intended to keep patients outside of hospitals. As you know, the main challenge is not overcrowding the hospitals that could be overwhelmed in this type of situation. And if patients can stay at home, of course, that is a favorable option. What you want to be able to do, even in large populations, is create a kit that makes sense for your specific needs. Now, everybody, I think, most of the population in India have mobile phones. So much can be done on mobile phones. You can download an app, and on this app, you could report vital signs. You could have a kit that only has a device that measure saturation, which is very cheap, about $5-10 per device that you could put on your finger, and through Bluetooth, provide the information to the app, and through the app, all the information is gathered and aggregated to a central location where you could track large populations, and then see if somebody is in trouble, to actually send an ambulance over and bring him to the hospital only if he gets to that situation. So the kits can be, of course, changed to fit the different environments, the different population sizes, and so on. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full kit. It could be partial solutions. But the idea is that today, with mobile health and the fact that all of us have a phone, or most of us have a smartphone around, we could use that as a small device, medical device, to do much of the work that is needed for COVID-19. So thinking about these lean home kits is something that I would suggest can work even in India, in a large population such as India.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Karen from Sheba. I'm going to forward along a few other questions that we received from the chat. The next one was, can the technology employed at ARC also be used in other countries like Niger?
So thank you for the question. Of course, just like the answer I gave relating to India, I think the same answer could fit other countries as well. So specifically, when we talk about COVID-19 and the need for to be able to monitor patients outside of hospitals and inside hospitals, much of this technology is fitting. Now there are companies that are coming out with solutions like the Untitled I showed, which is creating a lot of interest around the world now. It looks very nice, right? Very cool stuff. But there is technology now that is much, much cheaper, that actually uses, again, your smartphone, and it's based on the power that each of our smartphones have. And you all know that the CPUs on the smartphones today have huge capabilities, much more than they're actually used when we use them on day-to-day. And there are technologies that are coming out now that have similar devices that allow you at home to use your smartphone as a stethoscope and to have a healthcare practitioner, a clinician, be far away and listen again to heart and lungs and so on. And this would be much, much cheaper than the technology that exists today. So I think we're going to see a lot come out of this situation and this tragedy of COVID-19 in the next weeks and months. We're going to see a huge amount of innovation in digital health that will allow us to take this forward to the home level. And again, I think this could work in any country in the world. So in Nigeria, we'll be happy, of course, if you have any specific needs, to talk with you about that as well.
I have a question
Okay,
for...
the next question is for Avner and Avi. We'll go first to Avner. And the question is, to your professional knowledge, do you think differently or problem solve differently when there's an urgent need for the solution or treatment versus the typical product or academia development cycle?
Hi, thanks for the question. And I think it's a very relevant and important one. When we are working on a fast cycle, I think one of the key points is to look at what are the things that we can, resources we can use very quickly. If you remember the movie, I think it was Apollo 13, when they had the challenge, they needed to save the spaceship. They told the team, here's the things that you can use, only the things on this, in this bag, and find a solution with that, with the things in that bag. The same is the situation here. You look only at the things that you can achieve quickly and see what you can do with them. For us, for example, when we needed to find a better algorithm to optimize around COVID-19, we said we don't have enough data for that yet. So we look for data that's close to it and optimize on that data set and iterate very quickly. Every day or two can be another iteration, test it and improve and continuously improve that way to reach a quick answer in a time of crisis. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add. So thank you, Avner, for that answer. I totally agree with you.
We can't hear
I think that what COVID at least taught me, I was called up to the Israeli Home Front Command.
Avi, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I think you're muted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So when this pandemic broke out, I was called up to the Home Front Command, the Israel Home Front Command, Pikud Orif it's called, as an officer to try and help also with the outbreak. And what I saw is that when you bring many people together, you actually can give very good solutions in a short time. And I think a situation like COVID-19 actually calls us to change the scientific times we have today. It can't be done anymore only in small research labs and small groups. It has to be done actually in something much larger. I would say internationally, it should be something like a scientific NATO. We have NATO to protect us in the arms front. And I think that scientifically, when there's a pandemic that actually is risking the entire human race, maybe this pandemic we're facing is a lighter one, but infection-wise, it won't be far to say that maybe 1/4, 1/3 of humanity will be impacted by COVID. And just imagine if COVID was a little more deadly than it is now, how our world and how our life would actually look. So I think it totally calls for a scientific NATO. And in the Israeli front, I think it calls also for creating something like, and sorry, I'm taking military examples, but when the US needed to reach fast solutions, they had the Manhattan Project. In a short time, they actually reached the goal that was set. I would say here we have a COVID, we need a COVID project where we'd bring hundreds of scientists to work together under one auspicious in order to treat this pandemic and to come to faster solutions. I think those are the that's what I actually learned from this pandemic. And from what I hear is that in Israel and the United States, that's the direction where governments are going to go. And it seems just like the medical doctors are sharing information and scientists are sharing information online, it seems that also coming to a solution, we need larger efforts with the huge funding behind it in order to reach solutions in practical periods of time, because this is only the first pandemic, at least I've experienced in my life. I think many of us, it's the first time we've seen it, but it can escalate next time. And we have to have now build the infrastructure for much faster solutions for maybe a worse pandemic that can hit us in several years or maybe even several months.
Okay, Avi, we'll stay with you for the next question. Is the ARDS treatment already being used for patients in hospitals?
Yeah, I emphasize the ARDS treatment is a preclinical treatment. I showed it's preclinical. Targeting the lungs is something that we also in my lab were not aware of more than a year and a half ago, and then we were approached by a funding agency that asked us specifically to work on lung problems. And I'd say that I think that we feel that we were lucky to have that ahead of time. And why that funding agency really saw to fit to treat ARDS ahead of time, I understood at the time, but maybe it was something also wider.
Okay, thank you, Avi. The next question is for Eyal, and it is, what are other technologies would you like to see for telemonitoring and teletreating COVID-19 patients?
So thank you for the question. Well, of course, if we're trying to think about telemonitoring, so monitoring patients at home, we're looking for devices or solutions that would be able to provide us continuous monitoring, but also provide us little burden on the patient. One of the things we are seeing lately is what is called wearable sensors, so sensors that are being worn on the body, whether it's patches or something else, a vest, something that is worn on the body. One of the problems with that is that patients many times tend to take that off because it's not very easy to use. And if you take a shower, you want to take it off or it falls off and so on. And we're thinking of sensors now that will be able to monitor continuously, but without having direct contact with the body. So EarlySense was really in the forefront of that, years ago when they started their solution to have a device that is under the mattress and has no direct contact. And when the patient is in the bed, it monitors. And I think other solutions will need to think in that fashion to be able also to monitor when you're not only in bed, but outside of bed. And we're seeing some direction of that being done with technologies such as radar technology and lasers and other solutions that I think would be very interesting to many of you here in this group. And I think this is where we're going with some of those solutions to be able to continuously monitor patients without direct contact to the skin. That's just the beginning of the problems, because the next problem, once we are able to do that, is making sense of the huge amounts of data that we're starting to gather. Because when we have continuous monitoring, that means we're going to have huge amounts of data, and then we're going to need artificial intelligence solutions to really bring up the insights from that data, so that we could actually make it actionable for those patients. So this is where we're going in the next few years: continuous, without contact, and AI on top of the data.
Okay, we have another question on whether there is any research being conducted on alleviating cytokine storms, as this is a major impact to negative outcomes. I'll have it I'll send it over to Avi.
Yeah, so one, I would also refer to the medical doctors on the line, but the answer is that the cytokine storm absolutely is one of the considerations. Trying to suppress it when patients are enter that state, I'll say that usually it's a very rapid deterioration. And I think what we're seeing mainly also in the clinic, but also in research, is trying to not to reach that state where cytokine storms can actually impact the patient. So actually stopping the deterioration of the patients is what's really critical, because once a patient enters that cytokine storm, it's very, very hard to save the patient. I think it's this question could be best also be answered by a medical doctor. I know that research-wise, this is an issue that we face when we develop a medicine or develop vaccines to try and prevent from cytokine storms to occur, because when you start modulating the immune system, that's one of the outcomes that can actually occur. So of course you need very careful engineering of new vaccine and new medications in order to prevent exactly that from happening in the patients.
Okay, well, I'll pass it along to Eyal to add.
So, you know, it's obviously that's one of the problems. And as Avi was saying, the best solution is to avoid it altogether. You know, there are a couple of attempts to do that, to try and halt the cytokine storm. One of the things that is already existing in that is interleukin-6, which is being used also, which was used in clinical trials before to try and halt that, but we're not seeing good results with that in COVID-19 patients. And what we're trying to do is block some of the mechanisms. So far, nothing has been successful. So I'm not sure that this would be the right path for us to focus right now. You know, the best strategy is to avoid it altogether, as was said before.
We had a question about what is a cytokine storm, if you could just explain that.
Well, the cytokine storm is the end result of what we think happens when we get to COVID-19, to the worst condition of COVID-19, when you pass through all the phases and get to a point of really rapid deterioration and life-threatening state. It's basically a situation that we see also in other conditions. Of course, it was very relevant before, and there was a lot of research performed before COVID-19. So we know about this condition a lot. The idea is that cytokines are very small molecules, small proteins in our body that have a role to play in the immune response. When we trigger an immune response to a catastrophic event, the most common is sepsis. Sepsis is, or septic shock, is something that is the end result of many infections left untreated. Pneumonia, urinary tract infections, skin infections, bone infections, many of those, if you do not treat them or if you don't treat them adequately, can continue to deteriorate to a point of septic shock, which is, of course, a life-threatening event. In that specific point in time, what we see is a storm of these cytokines. And what they do is they have a negative effect because of the overexpression, overuse of those cytokines that have a role to play, but not in a storm fashion. In storms, all hell breaks loose, as you know, and this is what typically can happen. You see dilation of the blood vessels and a drop in blood pressure, and the lungs stop functioning, and so on, and damage to many organs. And this is what we're trying to avoid. So, as I've said before, it's an end result that we wish not to get into, and we're trying to avoid it well before it happens.
Okay, and this is the last question that we'll take. Do you see some possible usages of nanotechnology that could help you in fighting COVID-19, either in equipment, medication, etc., that you do not have yet?
For me, for Avi, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take it. So yeah, I think one of the examples we showed are nanoparticles that can target the lungs and deliver a medicine locally to the lungs. Delivering RNA is another area where nanotechnology is being used. I think in equipment-wise, looking at nanotechnology for decontamination is another issue that people are actually investigating too. The advantage nanotechnology really gives is the ability to target specific tissues and target specific cells within those tissues So it's that accuracy, which we didn't have in the past. Again, I mentioned earlier that the size of these particles is about 1/1000th the width of hair on our head. And it's smaller than any cell we have inside the body. And these nanoparticles actually travel and detect the site of disease inside the body where they carry out their activity. So that's I think it's a new level of complexity that we were able to reach. Not only our lab, many labs around the world that work on nanotechnology today. Israel surely is a pioneer in the field of nanotechnology. And I think here we should mention our former late president, Mr. Shimon Peres, who invested a lot of funds into the field of nanotechnology, really saw it as a future goal of Israel. And since then, Israel has become a real champion in that area, but we collaborate with many, many other countries around the world. And I do believe that nanotechnology can solve or help treat many sophisticated or complicated diseases, as we see today in the clinic.
Thank you all.
Well, I have to go through this again, but a big thank you for everybody here. Thank you very much for the excellent questions by the audience, and thank you very much to the excellent speakers here, Avner, Eyal, and Avi, and hope to see you in future webinars. All the best to you all. Bye.
Thank you. Shalom.
Just a reminder that this is being recorded.
This has been recorded, so if anybody wants to hear the recording, just let us know. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.